So in this video, I'm going to show you how I power wash. So specifically, I'm going to do my pool deck, the concrete area. And if you've ever power washed before and done the regular with these, kind of the stripe, the thin, as you kind of go back and forth, it's hard to get a good pattern because you're kind of lifting up back and forth. So what I'm going to use instead is this round power wash attachment for the deck, where it's got these spinning heads inside that spin and give you a nice consistent pattern, so that you can hold it and it keeps consistently away from what you're trying to clean. So check out the description below, where I have some links to the attachment that I'm using and a little bit additional information. So like every project, you want to start off cleaning up. So this is the prep work. So get everything out of the way. So I'm going to be cleaning the concrete here. You can see quite a mess here. I just pulled the cover off, so I still got all the dirt everywhere. So go around, get any leaves out of the way, get your equipment ready. You can see I've got furniture and kind of moved it out. You might want to, probably not the best idea using flip-flops, but it makes a big mess, so I don't want to get any shoes too dirty. So you can see I got everything. I got some water. I got the tools I need. The power washer needs hose, so I make sure it reaches as far as I can. I need it to the furthest part, so I know I can get it all the way out to my power washer over here. And then the attachment, I know it can reach from where the power washer is to the furthest point. So if you ever never used before, the regular garden hose comes in here, gives you the water, and then the engine compresses it or pressurizes it, and then it goes into your pressure hose. Just clips in like that, and then that gives you the pressure water. Obviously out here, there's usually a couple different nozzles that you can replace on here. These black ones, or if you kind of see the end, how it's kind of wide, that's usually for dispersing or dispensing soap or different types of solvents, versus if you look at, so it's a little bit rusted, but you can see how it's a lot more narrow, and it's going to focus obviously the same amount or the amount of water into a much more pressurized stream. There's usually like a little pen one or pin one. That one's usually for shooting long distances. But the more pressure, obviously the more it's going to clean, but also possibly cause damage. And so you have to watch out for what you're using it on. So like this is a exposed aggregate. You can see the stones, so there's little bits of concrete in between. So if you put too much pressure on it, you may rip that out or start tearing up some of these rocks. Same thing with wood. You gotta be really careful. You don't want to start damaging the wood and actually denting it. I'm actually going to be using, just because I have so much surface area to clean, I have this tool here, which has these, you can see this really small focused jet of water, and there's two of them. And what happens when you turn it on, see how it's angled, it makes it spin like this, and it creates essentially a disc. So now I have everything hooked up, and so it's the source water and then the pressurized water hose. And so I'm just going to try it out. So you need the water running, so I make sure it's press the trigger, there's no air bubbles or anything before you start it up, because it needs it for cooling usually. Just to show you here it is without the pressure, just kind of a normal water stream. And then I just start it up, and of course it's old, so you keep pulling, and eventually hopefully it should start like any good gas powered motor. So here it is after it's running, and you can see that there's a lot higher pressure using the same nozzle, but you can see it's coming out a lot stronger. And so I used it just to kind of wet it down. I don't really need to here. I'm not using any detergents, but you can see that there's not enough pressure with this regular nozzle. Just that it's good for wetting, kind of pushing things around again, or using detergent. But once you switch to the stronger or the more narrow focused, that's when you can actually clean and make sure it doesn't shoot off like this. I didn't have it in correctly. It went flying off, and also I think it had a little bit of the contaminants in there, so it just shot off with it, kind of hilariously. So luckily I was able to retrieve it and almost trip on the hose, but after I tried again. All right, there we go, now much better. So you can see this is what you probably normally are used to using. It gives you a nice focused stream, and you can clean. But it's also hard, as I mentioned, kind of as you go back and forth. If you ever used it before, you get kind of unevenness. Most time you're not going to zoom in like this, but you can see how I kind of left areas. You can always work with it, but I have such a large area, so this is what I'm going to use here. And you can see I promise I know how to use this, so I'm fumbling it around, but I finally got it on here, and this is what it looks like. Just give you a quick brief showing of it. You can see it has a much larger area. So this is 15 inches, and you can see it keeps that same distance, just showing you kind of washing it off a little bit, just because it was so dirty that the what had been cleaned or power washed off was just kind of floating everywhere, the dirty liquid. But you can see it can move around much quicker and get a much more consistent pattern. So I just switched here after I just kind of do a sample, and then switched to the white nozzle here just to kind of spray it off. And you can see I get a much better pattern. It's hard to see, there's shadows from the trees, and you can see at the top there I was just rushing it. So once you get a good overlapping pattern, you can get a nice consistent cleanliness, and again, pattern without having to move up and down on it. And this is what it actually looks like underneath. It's pretty impressive. It's kind of interesting looking. It's spinning like this and giving a nice pattern. So I'm doing it on the deck, or of the near the pool. So I do closest to the edge, just because it makes such a huge mess. You can see all that dirty liquid coming. If you don't have to worry where it goes, you can start wherever you like. So you can see I started just because it kind of slopes away from the pool, and then just kind of work overlapping. It's hard to see here, and I showed it a little bit better, where I usually do about a third, maybe a half of a stroke overlap, and I think that gives a good pattern. Again, I keep saying pattern because that's really what you want, is a good, consistent, so it's not clean, exaggerated in where you can see the lines. It's not going to be perfect, and once you get like the first rain, it'll be good. But here I've switched, so this is kind of the way I work. I use that rotary, and then I switch to the other nozzle and just kind of wash it off. And you can see here, sometimes you may have rushed it, and if there's a little bit, I'll usually go back with the strong and just kind of touch it up this way. I found another way is to just do a better strokes over top, and then you don't have to do that. But here's a larger area. Just see a little bit further back, and you can see this is why I like to do better, is just go over those areas that I missed with the circular attachment. I found it a lot easier. And so you can see here, I got a pretty good, it's clean. I got a little bit of stripes, but again, the first time it rains, it's gonna, that'll all even out. So don't spend too much time trying to be perfect. One other way I found that's good is for walls. So here I've got a lot of moss and algae, but you can see, so I'm using actually the strip or the attachment, and you can see it's making a giant mess. If you can see the pea gravel is just shooting everywhere. So that's one of the issues with anytime you're doing any of this stuff. But it is good for, I got moss on the top there, so really cutting through that instead of having to try to manually scrape it or use any chemicals, and you can kind of get in the cracks with it. Again, if it's an area that doesn't have you don't have to worry too much. But this was making a huge mess. So you can see it's all over my arm, all over my leg, and then it's actually shot the pea gravel everywhere, and then it was shooting some of it all over the concrete that I just cleaned. So it was a bit of a mess. So you can see here, I zoom in, it just shot, because the overspray was just hitting into the pea gravel and shooting everywhere. So you can see it's just a handful. So there was a lot I had to clean up here. So what I found was actually using that same attachment on the wall helped a lot and made it a lot easier, a lot cleaner, went by a lot faster too. I could make one pass with it. So you don't have to use this, but I found it's not good. It's not only good just for decks, but for, like I said, cleaning this way or anywhere where you don't want to get a lot of overspray. So here I can show you how fast it works or how clean. It's obviously sped up, but you can see it does a really good job, and it's perfect for this. And here it is. After I've gone through, you can see there's still some residue left over from the dirty water, but it make quick work of this. I think I did this in about an hour, and it was quite a bit. I think the first time I did it without this round attachment, it took a couple hours, and it still wasn't this great. So it's still kind of wet in areas. That's why it doesn't look good. But this is what I used. So I have that 2400 attachment, and this is the attachment. It's good for higher than that, but it does a really good job.